I found my wife in her office with a client's hand on her knee. That was just the beginning. What I discovered next made me hire a PI, drain our accounts, and vanish at 4 a.m. with only a wedding ring left behind. 2 years later, she knocked on my door pregnant, but I had an envelope waiting for her. My name is Chase Hollis. I'm 42 years old, and up until 3 months ago, I thought I had a solid marriage. I work as a pharmacist at Riverside Medical Center in Portland, Oregon. It's steady work, decent pay, nothing glamorous, but it kept the lights on and put food on the table for my family. I met Adrienne 7 years ago at a hospital fundraiser. She was an operations manager at the Grandview Hotel. Confident, sharp, beautiful. She had a 3-year-old son named Dylan from a marriage that ended badly. Her ex bailed when Dylan was a baby and never came back. I didn't care. The moment I met that kid, something clicked. Within months, I was the one teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, tucking him in at night. He became my son in every way that mattered. Adrienne and I got married a year later. Life was good, or so I thought. She worked long hours at the hotel, late nights, weekend conferences, business dinners. I trusted her completely. That was my first mistake. The truth hit me on a Tuesday night in late September. I'd finished my shift and decided to surprise Adrienne with her favorite coffee. She'd mentioned a late vendor meeting, and I figured I'd brighten her evening. I pulled into Grandview's parking garage around 7:30. The building was quiet, just a few guests in the lobby. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor where the offices were located. Light spilled from under her door. I was about to knock when I heard her laugh. Not her professional laugh, something softer, more intimate. Then a man's voice, low and familiar. I opened the door without thinking. Adrienne was perched on her desk, skirt hiked up, leaning close to a man I recognized. Michael Garrett, one of the hotel's biggest clients. His hand rested on her knee. They were inches apart, eyes locked. The coffee cup slipped from my hand and hit the floor. Dark liquid spread across the carpet. They both froze. Adrienne's face went white, then red. She scrambled off the desk, words tumbling out. Chase, this isn't. We were just. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I turned and walked out, my heart hammering in my chest. Behind me, her heels clicked frantically as she called my name. I didn't stop. I made it to the elevator and rode down in silence, my mind racing, but my body numb. That night, I drove around for hours. I didn't go home until past midnight. When I finally walked through the door, Adrienne was waiting in the living room, eyes red from crying. She started talking immediately. Explanations, excuses, apologies. I held up a hand. I don't want to hear it tonight. She blinked, confused. Chase, please. Tomorrow, I said quietly. We'll talk tomorrow. But I already knew there was nothing left to talk about. The marriage was over. I just needed time to figure out my next move. The next morning, I called in sick to work. First time in 3 years. I sat at the kitchen table nursing black coffee while Adrienne got Dylan ready for school. She kept glancing at me, her face tight with worry, but I didn't acknowledge her. Dylan came bouncing into the kitchen with his backpack, completely oblivious to the tension. Morning, Chase, he said, grinning. Can we practice batting after school? I forced a smile. Sure, buddy. We'll see. Adrienne drove him to school. The moment the door closed behind them, I grabbed my laptop and started making calls. First call went to my buddy Evan. We'd been friends since college, and he worked as a financial advisor downtown. Chase, what's up? Evan answered on the second ring. I need your help, I said, and I need you to keep this between us. There was a pause. What's going on? Adrienne's cheating. I'm leaving, but I need to do this right, financially, I mean. Evan let out a low whistle. Man, I'm sorry. Yeah, come by my office this afternoon. We'll figure it out. Second call was harder. I dialed the number I'd found online for a private investigator in Beaverton. A woman answered, gruff voice, no nonsense. Redwood Investigations, this is Karen speaking. I need someone followed, I said. My wife. I need proof of infidelity. Karen didn't miss a beat. How long you been suspicious? Since last night when I caught her with another man. You see them together? Yeah, in her office. But I need more than that. Photos, documentation, everything. Understood. I can start tomorrow. My rate is $150 an hour plus expenses. I didn't hesitate. Do it. We arranged a meeting for later that afternoon. I gave her Adrienne's details, work schedule, car description, usual routes. When Adrienne came home an hour later, I was sitting in the same spot. She hovered near the doorway like she was afraid to come closer. Chase, we need to talk, she began. I looked up at her. Yeah, we do. She sat down across from me, hands folded tightly. Last night, that wasn't what it looked like. I almost laughed. Really? Because it looked like you were about to kiss a client in your office. Her face flushed. We weren't. It was just, he was being inappropriate, and I was trying to handle it professionally. Stop. My voice was calm, cold. Don't insult me with lies, Adrian. I saw what I saw. She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears welled up in her eyes. I made a mistake. It was stupid, but it didn't mean anything, Chase. I swear. How long? What? How long has this been going on? She looked away. A few months. But it's over now. I'll end it. I promise. I stood up, grabbed my keys. I'm going out. We'll talk more later. Where are you going? Panic edged her voice. Does it matter? I walked past her without waiting for an answer. I spent the afternoon at Evan's office going over our finances. Joint accounts, mortgage, savings, all of it. Evan helped me open a new account at a different bank and set up automatic transfers. Small amounts at first. Nothing Adrian would notice. By the end of the week, I'd have enough tucked away to disappear if I needed to. That evening, I met Karen at a coffee shop. She was 50s, gray hair pulled back, sharp eyes that missed nothing. I handed over photos of Adrian, her work schedule, everything. I'll have something for you within a week, Karen said. Maybe sooner if she's not careful. I nodded. Thank you. When I got home, Dylan was already asleep. Adrian was in the living room, waiting. She looked small, defeated. Chase, please. Can we fix this? I looked at her for a long moment. I don't know yet, but I didn't know. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Dylan asked me about it 3 days later. We were in the backyard tossing a baseball back and forth, the autumn sun hanging low in the sky. He'd been quieter than usual all week, and I could tell something was eating at him. Chase, he said, catching the ball and holding it instead of throwing it back. Is everything okay with you and Mom? My chest tightened. This was the conversation I'd been dreading. I walked over and sat down on the back porch steps. Dylan followed, sitting beside me. What makes you ask that, bud? He shrugged, staring at his sneakers. I don't know. You guys don't talk as much. And Mom seems sad all the time. Did I do something wrong? No, I said firmly, putting a hand on his shoulder. Dylan, listen to me. Whatever's going on between your mom and me, it has nothing to do with you. You didn't do anything wrong. You hear me? He nodded, but didn't look convinced. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes adults have problems they need to work through. But no matter what happens, I want you to know something. I love you. You're my son in every way that matters. That doesn't change. Dylan looked up at me, his eyes shiny. Promise. I promise. He threw his arms around me, and I hugged him tight, my throat burning. This kid deserves so much better than what was coming. But I couldn't protect him from it. All I could do was make sure he knew he mattered. That night, after Dylan went to bed, I sat at my desk and wrote him a letter. It took me 2 hours and 3 drafts to get it right. I explained that I was leaving, not because of him, but because his mom and I couldn't stay together. I told him I loved him. I told him that when he was older, if he wanted to find me, I'd be waiting. I sealed the letter in an envelope, wrote, for Dylan, open when you're 18 on the front, and locked in a fireproof safe I kept in the garage. Then I called my lawyer. Susan Patel ran a small family law practice in downtown Portland. Evan had recommended her, said she was sharp and discreet. I met her the next afternoon. Susan was in her 40s, no nonsense, with graying hair and piercing brown eyes. She listened without interrupting as I explained the situation. So you want a clean divorce, she said when I finished. No custody battle, since Dylan isn't biologically yours. You just want out. Yes, but there's one more thing. I pulled out a folder I prepared. I want to set up a trust fund for Dylan. For college. I don't want Adrian to have access to it. Only Dylan, when he turns 18. Susan raised an eyebrow. That's generous, considering. He's a good kid. None of this is his fault. She nodded slowly. I can draft that. It'll take about a week to get everything finalized. How much are you putting in? $50,000 to start. I'll add more over time if I can. Susan made a note. Understood. And you're sure about this? Once we file, there's no going back. I'm sure. By the time I left her office, the wheels were in motion. The marriage was ending. I just had to wait for Karen's report to come through. Karen called me 6 days later. I was at work, counting pills in a pharmacy when my phone buzzed. "I've got what you need," she said without preamble. "Can you meet me tonight?" "Yeah. Same place. Same place." 8 o'clock. I showed up early, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and waited. Karen arrived right on time, carrying a manila envelope thick enough to choke on. She slid it across the table. "It's worse than you thought," she said bluntly. I opened the envelope. The first photo showed Adrian at a downtown bar, leaning close to Michael Garrett. The next showed them walking into the Grandview Hotel together. Then another of them, leaving 2 hours later, Adrian's hair messy, her expression relaxed. But it didn't stop there. There were more photos, different men, different locations. A guy I didn't recognize at a restaurant in the Pearl District. Another man, younger, meeting her at a gym I'd never heard of. Timestamps on the photos showed this had been going on for months. "She's been busy," Karen said, her tone clinical. 3 different men that I could confirm. Probably more I didn't catch. I felt cold. Not angry, just cold. How long has this been going on? Based on what I dug up, at least 6 months. Maybe longer. I closed the envelope and looked at Karen. "Thank you. Send me your final invoice." She nodded. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You seem like a decent guy." "Decent guys finish last," I said, standing up. When I got home, Adrian was in the living room watching TV. She glanced up when I walked in. "You're late," she said, trying to sound casual. "Had some errands to run." She studied my face, suspicious. "What kind of errands?" "Nothing important." I headed upstairs before she could ask more questions. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Adrian snored softly beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos. Not just the betrayal, but the pattern, the calculation. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd made a choice. Over and over again. By morning, I made my decision. It was time to move forward. I called Susan Patel as soon as I got to work. "I've got the evidence," I told her. "Let's file." "I'll have the papers ready by end of week," Susan said. "Once we file, she'll be served." "Are you prepared for that?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." But even as I said it, I knew the hardest part wasn't the divorce. It was what came next, telling Dylan. Walking away from the kid I'd raised as my own. That was going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Still, I couldn't stay. Not in this house. Not in this marriage. Not in this city. I had to disappear. And soon. The next 2 weeks felt like living in slow motion. I went to work, came home, smiled at Dylan, and avoided Adrian as much as possible. She knew something was wrong, but didn't push. Maybe she thought if she kept quiet, I'd eventually forgive her. She was wrong. During my lunch breaks, I met with Susan to finalize the divorce papers. She drafted everything. Division of assets, the trust fund for Dylan, everything. We'd been smart about our finances early on. The house was in both our names, but I'd been the one making the mortgage payments. Our joint savings account had about $30,000 in it. I'd already moved half into my new account. "Once we file and she's served, you need to be gone," Susan told me during our last meeting. "If you stick around, she'll make this messy. Trust me, I'm already working on it," I said. And I was. I'd been quietly applying for pharmacy positions in other states. Texas seemed promising. Good pay, lower cost of living, and far enough from Oregon that Adrian wouldn't think to look there. I had 3 interviews lined up, all phone calls scheduled for the following week. At home, I started packing. Nothing obvious, just things Adrian wouldn't notice. Old photos, important documents, a few sentimental items my dad had given me before he passed. I packed them in boxes and stored them in the garage, hidden behind old camping gear. Dylan noticed, though. Kids always do. "Why are you putting stuff in boxes?" he asked one evening, standing in the garage doorway. "Just organizing," I said. "You know how messy I can get." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. Instead, he walked over and helped me tape up a box. We worked in silence for a few minutes. "Chase," he said quietly. "Yeah, bud. If you leave, can I still call you?" My throat went tight. I set down the tape and looked at him. "Dylan, if I leave, it's not forever. When you're older, when you can make your own choices, you can find me. I promise." "But I want to talk to you now," he said, his voice breaking. I pulled him into a hug. I know. But sometimes life doesn't work the way we want it to." He cried into my shirt, and I held him until he stopped. When he pulled away, he wiped his eyes and nodded. "Okay," he said. "I'll wait." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dylan, about the life I was about to walk away from. But I also thought about the photos Karen had given me. The lies. The betrayal. Adrian had made her choices. Now I was making mine. 3 days later, Susan called. Papers are ready. We're filing tomorrow morning. The server will deliver them to Adrian at her office tomorrow afternoon. You need to be gone by then. I will be, I said. That night, I loaded the last of my boxes into my truck. Adrian was working late, some event at the hotel. Dylan was at a friend's house for a sleepover. It was the perfect window. I walked through the house one last time, turning off lights, locking doors. I stopped in Dylan's room and looked at his baseball trophies, his posters, the drawings he'd made in art class. I left an envelope on his pillow, just a note telling him I loved him and that he could keep the baseball glove I'd bought him last summer. Then I got in my truck and drove away. I didn't look back. By 4 a.m., I was already 200 miles south on Interstate 5. The roads were empty, just the hum of my truck and the occasional semi passing in the opposite direction. My phone buzzed a few times, texts from Adrian asking where I was, but I ignored them. Around noon, I crossed into California. I pulled into a rest stop near Redding and checked my phone. 15 missed calls from Adrian, 10 texts, 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to them. Instead, I called Evan. Chase, where the hell are you? He answered immediately. Heading to Texas. Susan filed the papers this morning. Adrian should have been served by now. Evan let out a long breath. Man, she's been blowing up your phone. She called me twice already. She's losing it. That's not my problem anymore. What about Dylan? I swallowed hard. I left him a note. And the trust fund is set up. He'll be taken care of. Evan was quiet for a moment. You're doing the right thing, Chase. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you are. Thanks, man. Where in Texas are you headed? Austin. I've got a job interview lined up at a pharmacy there. If that doesn't work out, I'll figure something else out. Good luck. And Chase. Don't look back. I hung up and got back on the road. Over the next 3 days, I drove straight through, stopping only for gas and quick naps in rest areas. My phone kept buzzing. Adrian, her parents, even a few of her friends, but I didn't answer. I'd changed my number the moment I crossed the state line. When I finally rolled into Austin, the city felt like a different world. The air was warm and dry, the sky impossibly blue. I checked into a cheap motel off South Congress and slept for 12 hours straight. The next morning, I woke up to a new message from Susan. Adrian hired a lawyer. She's contesting the divorce. This might get messy. I called her back immediately. What does that mean? Susan's voice was calm. It means she's going to fight. She'll probably try to claim you abandoned the marriage or that you owe her spousal support. But we've got the evidence of her infidelity. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. How long will this take? Could be a few months. Maybe longer if she drags it out. But Chase, you did everything right. You documented everything. You moved your money legally. She can't touch you. And Dylan. He's not your biological son, and you never legally adopted him. She can't claim child support from you. The trust fund is separate. She can't access it. I felt a weight lift off my chest. Okay. Thanks, Susan. Just stay put and let me handle this. Don't contact Adrian. Don't respond to her messages. Let the lawyers do the talking. I hung up and sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring out the window at the Texas sun. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Adrian was in the past. Dylan would be okay. And me? I had a fresh start waiting. Now I just had to build it. Austin was everything Portland wasn't. The air was warm and dry. The people friendly without being intrusive. And the city had this energy that made you feel like anything was possible. I spent the first week getting my bearings, finding an apartment, exploring the neighborhoods, getting a feel for the place. The pharmacy job I'd lined up fell through at the last minute. Budget cuts, they said. I wasn't too worried. I had enough saved afloat for a few months, and Austin's job market was solid. But as I walked around the city, something shifted in me. I didn't want to go back to counting pills behind a counter. I wanted to build something that was mine. I remember my grandfather. He'd been a pharmacist too, but he'd owned his own place, a small independent pharmacy in Eugene that served the community for 40 years. He'd always told me that ownership was freedom. At the time, I thought he was just being old-fashioned. Now I understood. I started researching. Austin had a growing population and plenty of neighborhoods underserved by independent pharmacies. The big chains dominated, but there was room for someone who cared about personalized service. Within 2 weeks, I'd found a small commercial space in South Austin, near Zilker Park. The rent was reasonable, and the location was perfect. Residential area, families, older folks who'd appreciate a pharmacist who knew their names. I met with a small business loan officer at a local credit union. She was skeptical at first. I was new to town, didn't have much credit history in Texas, but when I showed her my business plan, my experience, and the capital I'd already saved, she came around. "You've done your homework," she said, leaning back in her chair. "I think we can make this work." 3 months later, I opened Hollis Family Pharmacy. It wasn't much at first, just me and one part-time tech, but it was mine. Every prescription I filled, every customer I helped, it felt like I was rebuilding myself piece by piece. Around that time, I met Nadia. She came in one afternoon looking for advice on her daughter's asthma medication. She was warm, genuine, and had this easy laugh that made me smile for the first time in months. We started talking, and before I knew it, an hour had passed. "You really care about this stuff, don't you?" she said, smiling. "Yeah," I said. "I do." She came back a week later, then again the week after that. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to ask her to coffee. She said yes. Nadia was a nurse at Dell Children's Medical Center. She was 35, had a daughter from a previous relationship, and understood the demands of healthcare. She didn't ask too many questions about my past, and I appreciated that. When I finally told her about Adrian, about Dylan, she just listened. "You did what you had to do," she said quietly. "That takes strength." We took things slow, but within 6 months, we were inseparable. Nadia grounded me in a way I didn't know I needed. She reminded me that not everyone was like Adrian. That trust was still possible. Meanwhile, the pharmacy was thriving. Word spread fast in South Austin about the guy who actually took time to explain medications and didn't rush you out the door. I hired another tech, then a second pharmacist. Within a year, I was looking at opening a second location. Life was good, better than good. I'd built something real from nothing, and I'd found someone who saw me for who I really was. But in the back of my mind, I always thought about Dylan. Wonder how he was doing. Hoped he remembered me, and hoped that someday, when he was ready, he'd find his way back. 2 years had passed since I left Portland. 2 years since I'd walked away from Adrian and the life we'd built. In that time, I'd become a different person. Stronger, more focused. The pharmacy was doing well, 2 locations now, with a third in the works. Nadia and I had gotten married in a small ceremony overlooking Lake Travis. Life felt stable in a way it never had before. I was in my home office one Saturday morning, reviewing inventory reports when the doorbell rang. Nadia had taken her daughter to soccer practice, so the house was quiet. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and froze. Adrian stood on my porch. She looked different, thinner, tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Chase," she finally said, her voice shaky. I didn't respond. I just stood there, my hand still on the doorknob, staring at the woman I'd spent 7 years with and 2 years trying to forget. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside without a word. She walked past me into the living room, her eyes scanning the space. The modern furniture, the photos of Nadia and me on the mantel, the life I'd built without her. "Nice place," she said quietly. "What do you want, Adrian?" My voice was flat, emotionless. She turned to face me, wringing her hands. "I needed to see you, to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about." "Chase, please. How did you even find me?" She hesitated. "It wasn't easy. I hired someone, a private investigator. It took months, but you hired someone to stalk me." I felt a flicker of anger, but I kept it controlled. "I needed to find you," she said, her voice rising. "You just disappeared. You left without a word. Do you have any idea what that did to me? To Dylan?" "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't you dare bring Dylan into this." Her eyes filled with tears. "He asks about you all the time. He misses you." I turned away, my jaw tight. "You should go." "Chase, I'm pregnant." The words hit me like ice water. I turned back slowly, staring at her. "And I already had your child," she added quickly. "Dylan, you raised him. You were his father. And now I'm pregnant, and I thought you should know." I walked to my desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the thick manila envelope Karen had given me 2 years ago. I kept it, not out of spite, but as a reminder of who Adrian really was. I handed it to her. "Open it." She looked confused but took the envelope. When she opened it and saw the photos, her face went pale. Photo after photo of her with different men. Hotels, bars, restaurants, all time-stamped, all documented. I know everything, Adrian, I said coldly. Every lie, every man, every hotel room. So don't stand in my house and try to manipulate me with a pregnancy that sure as hell isn't mine. She dropped the envelope, photos scattering across the floor. Chase, get out. Please, I need help. I don't have anywhere to go. The hotel fired me. I lost the house. That's not my problem. She dropped to her knees, grabbing my arm. Please, I'm sorry. I made mistakes, but I'm pregnant, Chase. I can't do this alone. I pulled my arm free and stepped back. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed. What are you doing? She asked, panic flooding her voice. Calling the police. You're trespassing. No. Chase, please. The operator answered. 911. What's your emergency? I need to report a trespasser at my residence, I said calmly, my eyes never leaving Adrian. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers, a woman in her 30s and a younger guy who looked fresh out of the academy. They stepped into my living room where Adrian was still on her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, mascara streaking down her face. Sir, what's the situation here? The female officer asked, her hand resting casually on her belt. This woman showed up at my house uninvited, I said calmly. I asked her to leave. She refused. She's trespassing. Adrian looked up, her eyes wild with desperation. Officer, please. I'm pregnant. He's the father. I just need help. The officer glanced at me. Is that true, sir? No, I said flatly. We've been divorced for 2 years. I have documentation proving she was unfaithful during our marriage. Whatever situation she's in now has nothing to do with me. Adrian scrambled to her feet, clutching at the officer's arm. He's lying. We were married. He raised my son. He owes me. Ma'am, I need you to calm down, the officer said firmly, pulling her arm free. She looked at me. Do you want to press charges? I hesitated for a moment, looking at Adrian. She looked broken, desperate, like someone who'd lost everything. Part of me, a very small part, felt pity. But then I remember the photos, the lies, the way she destroyed our marriage without a second thought. No, I said. I just want her to leave and never come back. The officer nodded. Ma'am, you need to come with us. No, please. Adrienne's voice broke into a scream. Chase, please. I don't have anywhere to go. I lost everything. The hotel fired me. I can't pay rent. I'm pregnant and alone. That's not my problem, I said, my voice steady. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. The officers escorted her out, her screams echoing down the driveway as they loaded her into the patrol car. I watched from the doorway until the car disappeared down the street, red and blue lights fading into the distance. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle over me. Then I heard a car pull into the driveway. Nadia. She walked in, took one look at my face, and immediately came over. What happened? Adrian showed up, I said. Her eyes widened. What? How did she find you? Hired a private investigator. She claims she's pregnant, tried to guilt me about Dylan, asked for money. I called the police. Nadia wrapped her arms around me. Are you okay? Yeah, I said. I'm okay. And I was. For the first time in 2 years, I felt completely free. The past had come knocking, and I'd closed the door on it for good. But there was still one loose end. 3 days later, I got a call from an attorney in Portland. Adrian had tried to file a paternity suit, claiming the child she was carrying was mine. I wasn't worried. Susan Patel was still my lawyer, and she handled it swiftly. She's demanding a paternity test, Susan told me over the phone. Fine, I said. Let's do it. 2 weeks later, I flew to Portland for the court-mandated test. I met Susan at the courthouse, a gray, imposing building downtown that smelled like old paper and stale coffee. Adrian was already there with her lawyer, a nervous-looking guy in an ill-fitting suit. She looked worse than she had in Austin. Thinner, more haggard. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The test was quick, a simple cheek swab. The results would take a few days. I didn't wait around. I flew back to Austin that same afternoon. A week later, Susan called. Results are in. You're not the father. I'd known that already, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. What now? The case is dismissed. She has no grounds to pursue you for anything. It's over, Chase. Good. Thanks, Susan. I hung up and looked out the window of my pharmacy. Customers were browsing the aisles. My staff was helping people. Nadia was meeting me for lunch in an hour. Life was good. Adrian was in the past, and that's exactly where she belonged. 6 years passed. 4 years of building my life, growing the pharmacy chain, and being happy with Nadia. We'd settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sunday morning hikes, Friday date nights, quiet evenings at home. It was the kind of life I'd always wanted but never thought I'd have. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring, I got a letter. It was addressed to me at the pharmacy, forwarded from my old Portland address. The return address was from Oregon, but I didn't recognize the name. I opened it in my office during a break. The handwriting was neat but shaky, like someone was nervous while writing. Dear Chase, my name is Dylan Reeves. I don't know if you remember me, but you were married to my mom for 7 years. You were the closest thing to a dad I ever had. My hand started shaking. I'm 18 now. I'm finishing high school in a few weeks, and I'll be going to college in the fall. A few months ago, I found out about a trust fund you set up for me. My mom never told me about it. When I asked her, she wouldn't talk about you at all. But I needed to know the truth, so I did some digging. I found the letter you left me, the one that said to open it when I turned 18. Mom had hidden it, but I found it when we moved apartments last year. I read it. I read it about 100 times. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being there when my real dad wasn't. Thank you for teaching me how to throw a baseball and helping me with homework and coming to my games. Thank you for not forgetting about me. I know why you left. I'm not a kid anymore. I understand now. I don't blame you. I'm writing because I wanted you to know that I turned out okay. I'm starting at Portland State in the fall, studying engineering. The trust fund is going to pay for most of it, which is amazing. I don't know how I can ever repay you for that. But more than the money, I just wanted to say that you were a good dad to me. The best I ever had. And if you're willing, I'd like to stay in touch. Maybe even visit sometime. I hope you're happy, wherever you are. Your son, Dylan. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter, tears running down my face. When Nadia came by the pharmacy later that afternoon, she found me still sitting there, the letter clutched in my hand. Chase, what's wrong? I handed her the letter. She read it silently, then looked at me with tears in her own eyes. Are you going to write him back? She asked. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I am. That night, I sat down and wrote Dylan the longest letter I'd ever written. I told him how proud I was of him. I told him that he could visit any time, that there would always be a place for him in my life. I told him that he'd been the best part of my marriage to his mother, and that leaving him had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. 3 weeks later, Dylan flew to Austin. I picked him up at the airport, and when I saw him walking toward me, tall, confident, looking so much older than the 10-year-old I'd left behind, I couldn't stop smiling. Chase, he said, grinning. Dylan. We hugged, and it felt like no time had passed at all. Over the next few days, we caught up. He met Nadia. We went to Longhorns game. We talked about college, about his future, about everything. And when he left, he promised to come back during Christmas break. As I watched his plane take off, I realized something. I thought leaving Dylan was my biggest failure. But it wasn't. Because I'd done everything I could to make sure he had a future. And now, he was back in my life. Not because I'd forced it, but because he'd chosen it. Life had a funny way of working out. Adrian was gone, lost to whatever consequences her choices had brought. But Dylan was thriving. And that was all that mattered. I drove home to Nadia, to the life I'd built, to the future that was finally, truly mine. And for the first time in years, I felt complete.